So for our arm series facing front, we are mostly going to be working on anterior chest, but the whole arm and shoulder is involved in general. But if you think about if we're facing that way and the straps are pulling from this direction, in general, we're going to be doing pushing motions, right? So these are all push variations. For our kneeling arm series facing forward, you could be anything from one blue spring up to a green or a red. There are some variations that you might end up wanting to be on a yellow spring as well. So for now, I've got it on a blue spring. And we want to start by tucking our toes on the shoulder blocks and grabbing onto those straps and then pressing a little bit of tension into the straps to begin here. So I'm zipping up through my core. You're going to press the feet back into the shoulder blocks and lift the hips up. So we just want to cue getting into this very cautiously as we are balancing on a moving surface and we have the thing that is moving what we are balancing on in our hand. So a lot of times people will lose that tension suddenly and kind of fall forward. So we just want to cue getting into this a bit carefully. We also, once we're here, want to cue zipping up through the pubic bone and lengthening down through the lower back so that we're not sitting back in a flexed hip, but really having to activate and work through the posterior chain, glutes and hamstrings, and get that lift through the front of the body as well, so we're in a hip extension. First variation we're going to start with is serve a tray. So just bringing your hands out in front of you as if you have a tray in hand. You'll start by pressing the arms straight forward and then bending the elbows back in. We want to keep the collarbones nice and wide as we press forward and as we come back resisting against those springs. And we want to make sure that the shoulders are not hiking up towards the ears or pressing past where we really want them to go and pulling us into a thoracic flexion, but just maintaining our spinal and torso position as we move the arms. We can then add a little open and close, pressing forward, opening out to a V, bring it back together, and close. So for hug a tree, we want to pull some tension into the straps and start with the arms out wide with a soft bend in the elbow and the pinky or middle finger a little bit lower than the shoulder. So there's a slight downward angle of the arm. And from here, we just hug those arms around a tree and then open the chest back out wide. Exhale, hugging forward. Inhale to open. As we open, we want to make sure that those straps don't pull our arms back where the chest flares forward and the rib cage flares up. We want to keep the rib cage nice and closed in the front and keep the arms in your periphery where you've got control over those springs, especially as we come to heavier spring tension here. For our push-up, we just go ahead and bring the tension into the straps and flip the palms forward and start to press forward through the arms and bend the elbows back to come in. So it's essentially a push-up, just seated upright. You can also, especially on a heavier spring, start to lean forward just a smidgen into a bit of a diagonal to add a little bit of trunk stability challenge here as well. For our tricep work here, we can bring the arms up overhead and hinge the body forward just a bit so we're leaning into that spring tension just a little bit. We don't want to over cue this to where people feel like they're going to fall. And this one sometimes feels a little bit safer on a heavier spring, but at the same time that gets heavier on the arm. So we just want to keep that in mind. And from here, we can start to bend the elbows and then press back through, keeping the shoulders out of the ears, collarbones wide, and keeping the tension in both straps. For our goalpost arms, we start in a goalpost position and we can press the arms straight up and then bend straight back down. Overhead press and elbows out wide, chest broad as you bring the elbows down. Another way that we can start to play with our positioning in any kind of kneeling arm series is adding a squat to our motion. So we can start with the hips back at a hover towards the heels and then push the hips up as we push forward and lower down. We could do this with any of the arm motions where we're adding a little bit of that hip flexion into extension or that hip hinge, working on keeping the trunk and the torso in one piece as we fold at the hips.